Welcome everybody. Today we are going to talk about the theme of thriller, and today we are having Miss Sarah and Miss Pragati Deshmukh. Our session's name for today is Mastering the Thriller Genre: Lessons from the Experts. And I can't wait to dive into the conversation with the two lovely ladies that we are having on the session today. Allow me to introduce Miss Sarah Bailey first. Sarah Bailey is a Melbourne-based writer with a background in advertising and communications. She has three sons and is currently the managing director of the Melbourne and Sydney offices of global advertising agency VMLYNR. Her internationally award-winning detective game of Woodstock series includes A Dark Lake, published in 2017, and winner of the Ned Kelly Award for Best First Fiction, and the David Award for Best Debut. Followed by Into the Night in 2018 and Where the Dead Go in 2019, Body of Lies is the fourth book in the series. Sarah has also published the best-selling The Housemate and Audible Original Final Act in 2021. Her books have been translated around the world and are available in the USA, the UK, Canada, India, China, and several countries in Europe. Lovely to have you, Miss Sarah. I can't wait to hear your insights into the wonderful questions that we have prepared.
Thank you. It's really exciting to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Likewise. Now on the panel we are having Ms. Pragati Deshmukh. Pragati Deshmukh is a seasoned media professional with almost 20 years of experience in creating content for film, TV, and ODT. Pragati Deshmukh is known for Burfi 2012, which is, by the way, is my favorite movie of one of the times. Battle of Sarah Gari 2017 and Out of Love 2019. She received the Wonder Woman Award 2023 as a trailblazer this year. Her passion for storytelling, coupled with the lockdown, drove her to write her first novel, A Dark and Shiny Place. Coming from an army household, she loves to travel and has an easily adaptable personality. She loves animals. She is an incurable optimist and always believes there is a solution to every problem. She continues to make successful and unique web shows and will soon venture back into films. She believes that the medium is not important, the key is to tell a great story. Such a wonderful insight. Thank you so much, Ms. Pragati, for joining us today.
Hello, thank you for the very warm welcome. Hi, Sarah. So lovely to meet you.
You too. Hello.
Great. Since we have acquainted right now, and this session about just reading out your introduction aloud, I do believe I will be taking a lot from the session, and so do will be the audience. So just right off the bat, let me put my first question to both of you. Creating a gripping thriller involves meticulous plotting. How do you initiate and navigate the process of crafting a storyline that keeps readers hooked from start to finish? So even it is like the listeners might relate to me as well. When I don't read much, however, when I do pick up book, it is actually I'm not able to meet them. Like that is the same wise for any TV show, any movie that I watch. I do tend to quit in the between. So how do you keep the readers engaged from start to finish? That would be essentially the question. So Miss Sarah, why don't you guide us further from here?
Yeah, sure. Well, the answer to the question from my point of view is that I actually tend to plot my stories as I go. I write mainly, police procedurals and crime thrillers, and I don't plan them out before I write them. I sort of tend to start writing, and then I think the sort of art of writing helps me work out what I think is going to make the most sense. So it's kind of instinctive. I do then have to go back and do a lot of editing and making sure that it all kind of, links together and that there's clues and red herrings in the right places. But yeah, I've tried sort of planning it out, and I think it's very difficult to plan out a whole book for me before I've gotten into the characters and the story. So as much as I would love to be the kind of writer that plans out a book, I tend to have to sort of do it as I go. And the nice thing about that is that my characters are kind of working out what is happening in the story, and then I'm also working out what's happening. So I think it sometimes makes that sort of case solving more authentic. Pragati, what about you?
So it's very interesting you say that, Sarah, because I thought I was the only one who didn't have a pattern and a system to writing. Especially when you read a lot of these books on writing, and there's a proper system and process that they describe. And I would always wonder, Okay, am I the only one? So it's really, really refreshing to hear you say that. I do usually work with a central plot. And like you rightly mentioned, that the characters, once your characters are in place, they sort of develop a mind of their own. And they kind of then tell you where they want to go from there. I think what I have learned has been, whether it's been in the visual medium, writing, or now with the book, what I've learned is to really follow that instinct that you spoke about. The instinct to, and that instinct comes from a place of experience as well, right? But primarily, it comes from a place to know that you've created great characters, you have a good central plot, and now let them do what they want to do with that. So, yeah, I think. Yeah. However, Atisha, I want to go back to what you mentioned, that you don't finish a book or a series or a film. We need to find how to tackle that problem.
Right, definitely. And I do believe like you must be having the solution to my problem as well.
Sarah, we need to figure this out. We need to make him a convert who's going to be finishing it.
Right, I
Absolutely.
do want to finish it actually.
Yeah, you have to finish. You always have to know who's done it. That's
Yeah.
important.
Right, definitely. So, like while we were talking about the characters, so coming to my next question. So, thriller protagonists often face complex challenges. How do you develop characters that resonate with readers and contribute to the overall suspense of the narrative? And, just adding on to it is whenever I do, read something or watch something, essentially, aside from the protagonist, I do emphasize a lot on the side characters as well. But just, Ms. Pragati, why don't you begin? Like, what is your take on this?
So I think it begins from a place of authenticity and relatability. Every character that we need to, uh, you know, of course, depends on genre. But what is important for a reader, what I have understood, is that the character has to be somebody that resonates somewhere with them.
Hmm,
Has to be relatable, that either you know a part of the character or somebody you know who is like the character. And then you have to ensure that the character is authentic, unless it's a fantasy sci-fi, but even in that, personalities need to be authentic. Once that authenticity and relatability come in, then I think the journey becomes a lot more organic, where like both of us mentioned, that the character starts then telling you how they want to
hmm,
proceed. So I think that is the primary and the crux of it, because once you have a plot and you put these authentic characters into situations that are against their grain, so you're sort of putting a fish out of water. And
hmm,
that's where then the world gets created. So you start having then tertiary characters, secondary characters. You create a world, because
hmm.
where we live in, we're not solo animals, we're pack animals, right? So we
Right.
also create a world and we live in that. So the same
Hmm,
thing you have to sort of replicate, or create like a mirror image of that in the stories.
hmm,
Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think the important thing with characters in stories, particularly mysteries, like this type of stories I write, every character plays a role, even if it's a really tiny role, but they're sort of there for a reason. So I think that the only thing that's maybe different from real life is that you probably have less characters overall. In your real life, there'd be people sort of everywhere. Whereas in the book, you don't mention every single person, and you kind of need to try to keep the cast relatively small, just so that readers can understand, who's who, and they kind of remember various characters. But the ones that you do bring into the story, they're so important. And the main character is obviously very important. But those secondary characters, I think, often are the ones that end up telling you a lot about the main character, whether it's because of the way that they behave when they're sort of interacting with them, whether they are observing things about the main character that perhaps the main character is not quite willing to accept about
hmm.
themselves or aren't even aware of. And they often emotionally are really important for the storyline as well, whether they're funny or they're difficult or they're nasty. They're very important in terms of the way the main character navigates the story. It is sometimes a bit difficult to work out just how much sort of drama to put on the main character, because they often cop an awful lot of emotional kind of drama throughout the storylines, especially if they are, like a police officer like my characters are, or journalists. But I think there is sort of a permission from the audience to let them, be quite full of story, and that kind of is the reason that they're reading, so that's okay. But you do have to kind of weigh it up with making sure that you're very realistic, like you said, Pragati, and that's where I think that world building comes in, because someone has to believe the world you've created. Even if it is a bit of a fantasy world, it has to feel like it all works together in the right way. So yeah, it is a lot of balancing and reviewing and just kind of stepping back from your own work sometimes and making sure it's all sort of stitching together properly.
Yeah, and I think these characters also sometimes work as a catalyst, right? To have your primary characters behave or react a certain way. We're constantly feeding off each other. And that's what our characters do. They're constantly feeding off each other. So when I started writing Dark and Shiny Place, when I started Maya's journey, I actually had a very different route in my mind. But along the way, because of the way Mira was interacting with her, it just couldn't go in the route that I wanted or had planned initially. And it just Mira played such a big part in actually shaping up my protagonist's life, that I realized that at some point she was probably becoming slightly more important, not in terms of the time or the pages, right, but just the kind of things that she was saying. So yeah, they sometimes really, not sometimes, actually, they always help in building the blocks for.
Yeah.
Right. Like often, what I believe is side characters are really important for the protagonist's character development throughout the series, like from start to finish. They have a role to play, and I do love characters. Like there's a strong energy from characters coming off, and I do love characters who can go toe to toe with the protagonist. Like not just the protagonist is doing all the thing. Like there are side characters who are doing helping and doing whatnot. So, what I could draw or what I could observe from both of your answers was that you both follow a voice of character in your head. So, is it might be a silly question, but like once you're drafting the character or any protagonist, like do you also tend to pick up the persona of the character that you're building?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in there. I think that it depends a little bit on if the book is written in first person or third person. So I've done both. The housemate is in third person. So I think because you're sort of slightly removed from the story, it's a bit easier to almost feel like you're watching the characters rather than being the characters. So you're still very invested and you're still very involved, but it's more as a voyeur and you're describing, what they're doing. With my other series, that's written in the first person. And so after a while, if you have a big day of writing and you're spending all day saying, I did this, I think this, I felt like this, you can get, I think, a little bit more emotionally invested, because it does feel as if you're looking at the whole story from that character's perspective. So I don't think I've ever taken on the personality of my characters. They're all pretty different from me, but I think it is a little bit dependent on, the perspective of the story and kind of how you're writing it and how you're taking that on board.
Yeah, I think for me it's been slightly different because so my book is written in first person, and I think I went slightly in reverse. I modeled the core personality of my protagonist on a lot of it to do with me. So I started actually because I also started writing the book in the pandemic. And I
Hmm.
also wrote it because I asked myself a question about if I was in this situation, how would I
Hmm.
react? So it started with the base started with me, seeing myself in in the character, and then sort of building from there. It was tough. I mean, and because mine is a lot more emotional, it's an intense, it's a psychological drama. It was, and there was the pandemic, and I was sort of living all of that. It was challenging to constantly, stay centered. To be honest, the refreshing part was that I started writing my second book around the same time, and that was a completely different story. That is, that's investigative. It's a thriller. It's out in the wild. So that kind of helped me balance, because that's where, like Sarah, you mentioned that as a third person, it's lesser. I don't know. Emotionally, you're probably slightly more removed. Um, but I did get attached to one of the characters. So and so, I realized subconsciously I'd started shaping her up as well, somewhere similar to me. And I had to like stop myself there. I had to be like, oh, okay, I can't be doing this again. So
Yeah, it's hard not to become invested, I think, because you spend a lot of time, writing these characters. So I think being invested is actually really good. But yeah, you have to be careful they don't all turn out like you, because you want them to be different enough to be their own unique character, and it's easy to sort of, I think, start bringing in what you would do. But it sounds like you got a handle on it. So
learning. And to be honest, I think the medium is so different. Like, you've written a lot more books. So, I'm sure you've had a process and you kind of, got there. I think for me, because, creating content for screen is so different. And I've been used to that world. So when I started writing it, because it's so a book is so much more personal, right? You would agree, I'm sure, because it's really, really your work, solo work, until it goes to publishers. So I think I'm really, really struggling right now, but I'm learning, and I'm looking at the struggle as something that I'm gaining out of rather than a challenge, to be honest. So yeah, I probably do an offline on tips with you.
Wow, such a great, opinion or the perspective coming from both of you, and combining it and mixing it together. It is a kind of what the session was all about: gaining insights, gaining tips from the masters. So, like now moving on to my next question. Thriller writing often draws from a rich tradition of the genre. Could you elaborate on the specific authors or works that might have influenced your writing, and how you have incorporated those inspirations into your unique voice? So, Miss Sarah, why don't you begin?
I mean, there is so many authors that I find inspiring, and in kind of quite a few different ways, I think. And I write crime, but in a way that wasn't really intentional. That just was the idea that I sort of first had, and then once I wrote one crime book, that was sort of what I needed to keep writing. So I do read a lot of crime. So I do really like a lot of crime authors in the industry. I loved the old-fashioned crime books, like even books like The Godfather. I loved when I was a bit younger, and all of the Patricia Cornwell books. I don't know if you know of those, but like a forensic anthropologist type approach, and a pathologist main character. So, really gritty and detailed and interesting. And then probably, moved into sort of more mainstream thrillers. And in Australia, there is this big community of crime writers, and, so many amazing people. And I think they're all really impressive. So I always read books and feel really jealous after I finish them about how good they are. But then I think there's also other authors that aren't in the crime genre that I find really inspiring as well. Just I think often the way they pull together a story and the structure of how they've decided to put a story together. I think there's lots to learn from all genres, and even genres, very different from crime, like romance. The way that they do dialogue, I think, is really impressive, and the way they build characters and relationships. So I think whilst there is a crime sort of genre, and that's often what I read, I think there's something to be learned from, every book really. And I love reading, and I think it's almost like the same as going to an art gallery for an artist. I think when an author reads someone else's story, you never copy it, but you definitely learn from it. And then I think it's really inspiring, and you sort of tend to take little bits and pieces of all of those types of ingredients, and they end up somehow, working into your own future stories as well.
Mr. Pragati, why don't you take us further from here?
Yeah, I think I love crime too. I love crime. I love horror. Um, I'm a sucker for philosophy, but more in the like slightly satirical way, and not something that gets very preachy. I grew up and absolutely love Agatha Christie and Stephen King. I think these two authors have contributed a lot to my creative mindset in terms of writing, in terms of interest in characters, in creating the world. And Agatha Christie did it in the most simplistic way. The time period that she worked and she wrote, the detective stories. I mean, of course, as a child, I read like Famous Five and Nancy Drew and, all the Enid Blyton stuff. But I think Agatha Christie really introduced me to Blyton stuff. But as a detective, and that was really fascinating. And then came Stephen King, where I started reading the whole this insane, crazy world that he introduced in every book of his. And with that world, some fascinating characters, and you believed it. That's not a moment that, I questioned, saying that, oh, this is fiction, and, you believed it. From there, of course, I progressed, and I read a lot of books by Richard Bach. There's Harry Mulisch. I think one of my favorite books ever is The Discovery of Heaven. If you've not read it, please pick it up. It's a great story, and says some really, really important, relevant, make some relevant statements. Very, very relevant. It was written during the war, but it's even relevant today. So it's like evergreen. And I think I keep going back to Lord of the Rings, and I keep going back to The Little Prince as and when I can. Yeah, I think that's pretty much there.
Right. So just a follow-up question to this would be, like, how did your respective backgrounds, like Ms. Sara into the advertising industry and Ms. Pragati into the media and the OTT industry? So how do you think your background, your profession has helped you in your writing career? Ms. Pragati, why don't you begin with this?
So I think because they're both creative backgrounds, and they're both linked to writing. It sort of integrated. I probably always wanted to write a book, and not probably, I actually did always. It's just that, one never gets down to it. And I was telling somebody the other day, as a creative person, either you want to be a film director or you want to be an author. There's really nothing in the middle that one knows of. It was only when I came into the industry and I started learning and seeing more, and my jobs one after the other just gave me so much more exposure. I realized that in the visual medium, there are these massive teams that we work together in creative teams. I've been a creative director for so many years now. I work with an OTT, I commission shows. There is just so much that one is, you're working with this really well-oiled machinery team, and each mind is so rich. There are ideas and stories and thoughts coming from everywhere, and then you keep just building on each other's. It's never a solo journey, right? It's like somebody will write a story, director will give its input, creative team gives its input, producer has another, and everything. You're from the paper to screen, you're constantly building, and you're shaving off, you're building, you're shaving off. So that, because I've been doing it now for so many years, I think writing a book just came to me organically, because something I wanted to do. And by now I had enough confidence, and I think the pandemic just presented itself the right time for me. And it just fell in very organically. In all of this, the common thing that I have experienced is visualization, because for any story to take life, whether it's on paper and eventually on screen, you need to first visualize it. And I think my career has, and it continues to, just sharpen that visualization for me because I'm able, so I think in visual medium. If
Hmm.
I automatically start thinking as okay, this is what it'll look like, this is what it'll feel like, this is how the character will move, this is how they will talk. So I'm already visualizing it. So
Hmm.
writing for me comes at a place that it's a visual picture, and then I just have to sort of type it out. So it's really, really helped. I mean, I don't think I would have picked any other career. I don't think I can do
Hmm.
anything else with my life.
So, Miss Sarah, what's your take on this?
Well, I think I've worked in advertising now for 20 years, so a long time. But the role that I do in advertising isn't the creative part. It's more the business and commercial client relationship management part. However, I'm still around that creative process and I'm still very involved in the strategy that we work out for our clients and also giving feedback to the creative teams and receiving feedback from our clients. So I think when it came to sitting down and writing a book, there wasn't necessarily skills that were directly sort of transferable, but I think just coming up with ideas and sort of having a passion for ideas and a curiosity was probably something that I really enjoy in my advertising work that I could bring across to writing. And then I suppose just, communication and trying to be clear in the way
Hmm.
that you convey an idea. We're often trying to encourage somebody to create something and make a decision, and we're always persuading people. So I think there's a lot of those kind of communication skills that sort of come across without even really realizing it. And then I think just the sort of practical elements too, like working to a deadline and being quite organized. Like I'm not sure, but I talk to a lot of my other writing friends and they are perhaps a little bit slower than me in the way they write. I think because I'm used to working really quickly, having something due, having goals and sort of a different sort of approach, I can be quite quick in the way that I write. And I'm pretty good with, word counts and deadlines and working to sort of certain dates to have certain parts of my books done. So I think it's both in the creative part that it's helped me, but also some of those more sort of practical workhorse kind of elements to how a book gets written. So it's been very useful, and I like still doing both because I feel like they do kind of light up different parts of my brain because they are quite different things to do day to day. But ultimately both, all about
Hmm.
ideas, which I think is a pretty lucky way to spend your working life, really.
Right. So I believe like both of your respected careers has somewhat helped you into framing your book and your overall experience matter. Like while you were connecting the dots, it must have definitely helped you out into framing the book, editing it, crafting the story and anything. So now moving on to my next question. So how have you witnessed the evolution of thriller genre over the time? And in what ways has it impacted your narrative choices and storytelling techniques? Miss Sarah, why don't you begin with it?
So, I mean, I've been writing now for about 6 years, and I think it actually has changed quite a lot, even in that short amount of time. Mainly technology, I think, has had a huge impact on the crime genre. There's, new social
Hmm.
media platforms that didn't really exist 6 years ago, like TikTok and different types
Hmm.
of ways that people are communicating. And when you're writing a crime novel, if you set it in present time, you can't ignore all of those platforms that people are using. I think also the way that media has changed, that sort of, I think, has an impact on crime because often, I mean, I've got a journalist character in my book, The Housemate, so it's relevant that people are listening to podcasts and reading less newspapers, and those types of things kind of set the scene, and you have to kind of include those in the books. So I know a lot of my author friends have started writing books in the past because it's easier to not
Hmm.
have to work out all of the new technology. And I can understand that, because it does start to get really complicated. You sort of have to be not only a good writer and sort of have a good idea, but then you also have to have all of this expertise in technology, which can be pretty overwhelming when you're trying to figure out a story. I think I guess the way that crimes get solved has changed quite a bit, just with advancements in DNA and different types of crime scene investigations, but also the types of crimes that are done, they're different too. So it's changed a lot. I think it will continue to change, but I think the good thing is that a good story is a good story no matter what. And the technology might change around everybody, but people and their emotions and their weird and wonderful personalities, that is ultimately what makes a really good story. So I think even if you're writing in the future, and there's a really futuristic plot and technology, the human element is what will always make the story. So I try to keep that in mind when I'm coming up with ideas. And if the technology feels like it's getting in the way, I try to take a step back and kind of think about the actual characters. But yeah, it has become more complicated. I think what Pragati said before about Agatha Christie is true. It used to be quite simple, and it was always about the people and almost the way that they were arranged. And now it can be the people, the places, the spaces, the technology, and all of the sort of ways that manifests. So yeah, it's perhaps become a bit more complicated, but I think also quite fun as well.
Ms. Pragati, why don't you take us further from here?
So, Sarah, it's very interesting when you mentioned technology, right? I think our readers, whether or their audience, right? There's only one pool of people who love thriller as a genre. And now for them, they will either read the book or they'll watch a film or they'll watch a series, they'll watch short videos, they'll consume content visually or they'll read it. Now for them, what I look at this evolution as a big positive, because what has happened is, like you rightly mentioned, the characters and the stories, I mean, that'll always be the core of it. But what is beautiful is that now our characters and stories are evolving as the world is evolving. So you're sort of updated.
Hmm.
Uh, while, yes, I understand that writing in the past would be simpler, a little less complicated, and as writers, as creators, it gives us a little more, leeway to write. But if you look at what readers consuming, there is so much conversations that are happening around new subjects, whether it's about the LGBTQ community or it is about, politics. It's a lot of conversations that are happening. And those conversations have now started reflecting in our pieces of content, in our books. And I think somewhere people are a little more unafraid now of expressing themselves a little more openly. And that's kind of showing in the kind of crimes that we write about.
Hmm.
Crimes are getting darker, you know,
Hmm.
and that's also because now it's plausible because it's happening. So when it is happening and it's darker, then your characters are becoming darker. They're getting more layered. There's no more good and bad anymore. Everything is about the gray, right? It's all about the layering of the characters. And that is authentic. That is true because that's how we are as human beings. It depends on which side our mind is bending. If you're bending to a
Hmm.
darker side, then you're more prone to be, on the criminal end of it, versus if you're bending on the other side, then you're more prone to be the investigator of it. So I think the evolution is very beautiful because it is in line with what's happening in the world today, and it's reflecting that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Right. So what I believe is like you have to incorporate the new world elements to make it more relatable to the reader. Like he or she might not be able to relate to that time period of 1800 to 1900s compared to how we are living into the current situation. Like example, as Sarah rightly said about the including the technology elements. So with this, I come to my next
Sorry,
question.
I just
So
want to add So so relatability, yes, but that doesn't take away from the fact that if there's a great entertaining story that's set in the 1800s, the reader will not enjoy it. It's not
Right.
taking away from
Definitely.
that. It is,
Right.
it's just that as we are evolving, we have more avenues because you'll always have the
Hmm.
past that is there that you can write about. And now you have so much more coming up in the future. So our playground is just expanding and
Hmm.
expanding. Creative mind has this boom that you can just
Right.
imagine so much more, and you have the past of so much to write about.
Right. Like there's much more to experiment with, like taking elements from past, present, and the future as well.
Yes.
Right. So with this, I come to my next question. So have real world events or situations ever inspired elements of a thriller plot? And how do you navigate the fine line between drawing from reality and creating fictional narratives? So, Ms. Pragati, why don't you begin with?
Sorry, can you just rephrase that question again for me? Can you just
Sure.
repeat?
No issue, sure. So, have real world events or situations ever inspired elements of your thriller plots? And how do you navigate the fine line between drawing from reality and creating fictional narratives?
So like I mentioned, my book is based on the pandemic. It's set in the pandemic, and I wrote it during the pandemic. So for me, the plot, it all started with the first 3 months were great because we were we had just moved into a new home, and everybody was coming closer with video calls, so on and so forth. And then is when the darkness started coming to light because you started reading and talking to people who had lost so many people, and there was so much despair around. And I asked myself that, so it's me and my husband and my dog, three of us, we live in my home. And I asked myself that if I was in a situation where I was all alone and I had to deal with a certain kind of supernatural happenings in my home, what would I do? And that scared the hell out of me. So it was, it really did scare the hell out of me. And I said, oh my God, if that's scaring me. And I started building and I started thinking about it. And I just kept started thinking about it. And there were so many stories that I was reading about people, their incidents, people about loss. There was so much grief that I was reading around. And I thought it was important to then also talk about mental health because people were really, they came crashing down in that time period,
Mm,
people who were holding strong their force, they just came crashing down. And I thought it was very important to also talk about that. So it kind of presented the right balance for me to craft my book, which was about, so it's a psychological thriller, but it's about the fine line between the psychological and the paranormal. So
mm,
I think for me, it can't be more proof, the pudding, that the situation, the real life setup, and the people around me and my own demons help shape my story.
mm. Right. So, Ms. Sarah, what's your take on this?
Well, all of the books that I've written so far are definitely fiction. They're not based on sort of real world events, and not even like with Pragati's book, they're not really even based on sort of a particular moment in time. They are set, in a certain year, but not sort of like an era like the pandemic or anything like that. However, there is always little bits and pieces from real world events that I think trigger an idea for me. So I'll often hear a news report or be listening to a podcast or even reading something else or speaking to a friend, and there'll just be some little seed of an idea that will sort of set something off in my mind where I think, oh, that's a really interesting premise, or that angle is something that I think would be worth exploring. And often it's sort of starts as one idea and kind of prompts another one. So I've not really ever taken a premise and sort of lifted and shifted it into one of my books, but a lot of the things that happen in my book might have been inspired by a news report or a real life event, and then I've sort of taken that thought, changed it a little bit, added a few things to it, and then the characters, sort of grab it and then they run with it as well. So I think it's really important as a writer to be very open-minded and, curious and always listening and thinking about different things and how people might react to different circumstances, because I think most most crime books are really something happens and then people react. And so I guess that's kind of what you're always thinking about. And then I guess you get a bit of a sense for an idea that might be able to be big enough to carry a whole story or a whole book. I think sometimes there's ideas that feel really strong and then they kind of run out of steam and you realize that they just don't have enough in them to carry a whole book. Hopefully you realize that before you've tried to write the whole book, but sometimes, you have to try. But yeah, I love sort of listening to lots of different things and reading lots of different stories, because I think it all just feeds into your brain and turns into, the idea for the next book. So it's an exciting moment when you start to piece it together in your own mind and you can get a sense that it might be somewhere that you can take it with your own characters.
Right. So, like while there is so much, like I have so many questions and there is much more to learn from and ask from both of you. However, our time is running a little short and I do have one individual questions of both of you and then we would be winding up this session. So, Ms. Tara, so your books have garnered prestigious awards. How do you handle both the critical acclaim and the expectations that come from, with writing subsequent novels in a successful series?
Well, my first book, you're right, did very well, and I was really lucky that I won a couple of awards for The Dark Lake. I didn't know any different, which was nice. So it was such an amazing surprise and such an amazing thing to happen. Luckily, I'd already started working on the second book, so I didn't really have too much time to think about it. I was just sort of busy trying to make the deadline for the second draft for the book that was coming out next. I guess I don't really think about it too much. I think because I have written a series with those books, it's really just about trying to make sure that the character remains consistent and that, people who have already read the books will enjoy reading the next ones because they want to see how her character develops. With The Housemate, that was a new standalone book, and that did feel a little bit harder, I think. I was a bit unsure how that character needed to sort of come to life. So it took me perhaps a little while to figure that out. And I didn't really think about whether or not it would ever win anything. It was really more just making sure that the book made sense and that it was a good story and that the character was interesting to read and that I felt like when I was writing it, it was a strong premise. So yeah, I don't think it tends to get in my head too much. It's really just trying to stay focused on the story and what's important, and writing a book that I would really like to read. And it's very hard to judge your own work. I'm sure Pragati would agree, but even when you're editing and you're reading it back, because you know what happens and because you've been so close to it, it's really hard to know if it's working or if it's compelling. But I think you do get a sense when you're writing it if the character is strong and if the character's making sense. So I try to focus on that and then hope that all the other bits and pieces make sense and fall into place.
Ms. Pragati, would you like to add something to it?
I think you're right. It becomes very difficult to have an objective point of view when you write something. It's your own work, and more so as a book because it's so much more personal. I think for me it was I kept wanting to rewrite, I kept wanting to edit. And finally, my husband was like, and my publisher was just, okay, you know what? If you're going to give us another draft, we're not accepting it. Like, this is it. Even after it was published, I sat with the published copy and a pencil and I was making notes. And I was really reprimanded for doing that. Yeah, I think it's just something I completely relate to. But congratulations. Must be a great feeling to, you know, your work to be appreciated the way it is.
Oh, thank you. Yes,
Right.
it was, it felt very, very lucky, and it was a pretty nice thing to happen with my first book. And yeah, I guess it's just nice to have other people, have that feedback. But even when you don't have that kind of feedback, I think it's just amazing to finish a book, right?
Yes. Yes.
So my next question for Ms. Pragati would be, as a content creator for leading OTT platforms, how do you balance your work in the visual medium with your pursuits as an author?
Like I mentioned, it's an organic integration for me. Um, what is the way I look at it is a lot of stories that I cannot tell on screen, I can write in my book. A lot of statements that I want to make, I cannot make on screen. I can integrate in my book. You know, um, there is because the visual medium has its own restrictions in terms of
Hmm.
number of minutes that one needs to make. You can't have a movie or series beyond a certain amount of minutes, right? But a book doesn't have that. I could write a 200 pages book, I can write a 400 pages book, depending on if the story is really engaging and it's keeping your attention and all of those factors. But the fact is that you don't have that timeline issue in terms of number of pages or number of minutes. So that's a big advantage. And the way I look at it is because of the nature of the work that I do, we get pitches every day. So I'm constantly reading and listening to stories constantly. And a lot of it gives me clarity because you know what is working, what is not working from an audience point of view, not just from a screen point of view, but even from, whether it's character authenticity, whether it is a plot, you know. So that kind of helps sharpen my skills in terms of storytelling, just help me get better at storytelling. And that then I balance it out by really writing organically, whatever I feel like writing in the form of my book. And like I have two books that I'm writing on in parallel right now. So
Hmm.
because there's so much that's, brewing in my mind constantly that, and it's I think the biggest challenge that I face is more than time management or any of that, because that I'm pretty good at. What I face, the biggest challenge in my head is to ensure that when I'm reading and evaluating any kind of concepts and pictures that are coming in for visual medium, I'm not using any of that into my book. So to
Hmm.
maintain the originality of my writing in my books is something that I think that is the biggest focus that and that I have to constantly keep, in back of my mind, saying that okay, because there's so much that I'm reading, right? It
Right.
can it can be very very simple to get inspired by something like like Sarah mentioned that you hear something on the radio or you see some piece of news and you take inspiration from that. But when you're reading somebody else's work that is being pitched to you, it's very wrong and it is very unfair to pick up some of that and then use it in my book. So that is something that I have to constantly work on drawing the fine line.
Right. So, Ms. Sarah, would you like to add something to it?
I think it's probably a little bit different for me in terms of work having any risk of seeping over into my books in a direct way. Potentially it could happen if I was writing a book set in that field of work, but I think less so for the ideas to translate across. I think for me, probably time management is more the challenge. I'm not working at the moment because I've just had a baby, but that's also a bit of a time management problem as well. So when I go back to work next year, just sort of juggling all of those things will be tricky. But I think when you like to write and you have a passion for ideas, you find the time somehow. Sometimes you find it easier than others. And definitely
Hmm.
there's some weeks where I don't get any writing done. And that's okay. I just have to work out when I can do the writing. So it's kind of just a constant sort of Tetris game, I guess, of working out when I get enough time to sit down and properly get into the story. But I think I also have gotten better at sort of thinking about the story while I'm, sort of getting ready or walking or driving or doing those kinds of things, so that when I sit down to write, I'm sort of ready to go with a bit of a plan, as opposed to sitting down and taking an hour to kind of warm up. So you get quite efficient, I think, when you have to. But yeah, it's tricky. My work is busy. I'm sure Pragati is the same. It's busy, and you do have to keep reminding yourself why you want to write and what's important to you. And if it's important enough, then you will find a way of making it work. But some days that can be hard.
Right. Thank you. So it was actually a really thrilling conversation. Thank you so much, Miss Sara. Thank you so much, Miss Pragati, for joining with us today. It was such a due to time constraints, I was not able to ask you a lot of questions, but with this, I would like to conclude the session. Thank you so much again for both of you joining, taking out the time and joining us in this wonderful initiative. And we would definitely hope to hear back from you again in some sort of another collaboration medium. Thank you so much with this. Thank you so much, audience, for tuning us at the end of the session. With this, I would like to end the session now.